You are listening to the Alpha's Love Stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. The ancient forest of Shadow Pine was a place of whispers. Not the gentle kind. No, these whispers spoke of things with claws and teeth, of a king who ruled from a throne of frost and fury. But on that particular afternoon, beneath a sky bruised purple with coming dusk, the whisper was different. It was a sound that didn't belong. It was crying. Kalen stopped dead, his boots sinking into the damp moss. He was a mountain of a man, a silhouette that could blot out the sun, his face a map of old battles carved in scars. His hearing, far sharper than any human's, sifted through the forest's choir, the rustle of leaves, the distant creak, the wind sighing through the high pines. And there it was again, a hitched, muffled sob, so small, so desperately trying to be quiet. A child. His entire body went still, every instinct on a razor's edge. A child here? In the heart of his territory, miles from any safe village, with night falling like a shroud? This was not just lost. This was a tragedy waiting to happen. The creatures that stalked these woods after dark had no pity for tears. He moved then, a shadow dislodging from a greater shadow. Despite his immense size, he flowed between the trees with a predator's grace, following the fragile thread of sound. It led him deeper, away from the game trails, into a thicket where the light was weak and green. His heart, a steady, heavy drum in his chest, began to pound with a different rhythm. Dread, anticipation. He found her in a tiny, forgotten clearing, curled into a ball at the base of a giant, gnarled oak. She looked like a broken doll discarded by the world. Tangled hair the color of wheat fields hid her face, and her little dress was torn and smeared with mud. Her shoulders shook with the force of her silent weeping. Kalen's breath caught. He had faced armies. He had looked into the eyes of monsters and made them blink first. But this tiny, shattered creature sparked a terror in him he didn't know he could feel. He knelt, the forest floor groaning softly under his weight, still several feet away. He made his voice a soft rumble, like distant summer thunder, trying to sound harmless. "Little one?" Her head snapped up, two huge ocean blue eyes swimming with tears, locked onto his. He saw the instant of confusion, then the dawning, absolute horror. She scrambled back, a sharp gasp tearing from her throat, her small back thudding against the unyielding tree bark. There was nowhere to run. He could see it all in her face, the sheer scale of him, the scars that spoke of violence, the intensity in his gold-flecked gaze. She saw a giant, a beast, a nightmare made flesh. Her voice, when it came, was a thin, reedy whisper of pure terror. "Mama said never talk to monsters." The words were a physical blow, a knife of ice straight to his core. Monster. He'd been called it before, in hatred, in war, but from this tiny, defenseless thing, it shouldn't have hurt, but stars above it did. He forced his hands to stay open, palms up, on his knees, a gesture of surrender. "I am not a monster," he said, each word careful, gentle. "I am named Kalen. You are lost, and the night is coming. The forest, it is not safe when the sun goes down. Please, let me help you." Her tiny chin trembled. "Go away." "I cannot do that," he murmured, his voice aching with a sincerity he hoped she could hear. "I cannot leave you here to the dark. What is your name?" A long pause. The forest held its breath. A tear traced a clean path through the dirt on her cheek. "Alara," she whispered, as if giving up a secret. "Ilara," he repeated, and the name felt strangely right on his tongue. "Ilara, that is a brave name, a strong name. Ilara, you must come with me, now." I can't." The cry was sudden, sharp with a panic that went far beyond fear of him. His eyes darted past him, back the way she had come, into the deepening shadows. They were out of time. Every instinct screamed at him that the true danger wasn't the approaching night or even the forest predators. It was whoever had put that specific hunted terror in her eyes. He had to get her to safety, now. Explanations could come later. "Ilara," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument, yet softened at the edges with a promise. "I am going to pick you up. I am going to take you to my home, where there are warm fires and soft beds, and no one will ever hurt you. Do you understand? You must trust me just this once." He didn't wait for permission. He moved forward, slow and deliberate, and reached for her. She flinched, a tiny, wounded animal, but was too exhausted, too terrified to fight as his large, careful hands slid under her. He lifted her as if she were made of spun glass and morning dew. And as he settled her against his chest, the ragged fabric of her sleeve caught on his tunic buckle and pulled up to reveal her thin forearm. Kalen's world stopped. There, in the murky twilight, he saw them. Finger-shaped bruises, purple and yellow, wrapping around her small wrist like a vile bracelet. Older bruises, sickly green and brown, mottled her skin. And as he adjusted his hold, the neckline of her dress gaped, showing the stark, angry red of a burn, fresh and cruel on her collarbone. A roar of pure, undiluted rage, silent and terrible, erupted inside him. His vision tinged with red. His arms tightened around her, not in threat, but in a vow so fierce it shook him to his bones. Someone had done this. Someone had put these marks on this fragile, trembling child. The lost girl in the woods was no accident. She was a victim, and the monster she needed saving from wasn't the one holding her. It was the one she had run from. Ilara was so light in his arms. She felt like a bird with hollow bones, like the slightest pressure might break her. She didn't struggle. She just shook, ragged tremors racking her tiny frame, her face buried against the rough wool of her cloak. She smelled of fear, of dirt, of crushed pine needles, and beneath it all, a sour, sweet scent of a feverish, malnourished child. Kalen moved, not with the stealth of before, but with powerful, ground-eating strides. The path back to Stonehaven Keep was a treacherous one in the dark, but he knew every root, every stone. The forest, sensing his urgency, seemed to part for him. His mind was a storm. The image of those bruises, that burn, it played over and over behind his eyes, stoking a fire in his chest that threatened to burn away his control. Who could do such a thing? Ilara's uncle, she had said, a man who got angry. The words were a pathetic, inadequate summary for the evidence written on her skin. After several minutes of rapid travel, her voice, muffled against his chest, finally emerged. It was so small, so utterly defeated. "He's going to find me." "No," Kalen stated, the word flat and absolute as a tombstone. "He will not." "But you don't know him. He has eyes. He always finds me. Even when I hide in the cupboard, he always knows." The cupboard. She said it so casually, a normal place for a child to hide during a game. But the tremor in her voice betrayed the truth. It wasn't a game. "He will never touch you again, Ilara. Do you hear me? Never." He looked down at the crown of her head, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. "I make you this vow, on my name, on my life. He is gone from your world." She was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the crunch of his boots and the distant howl of an owl beginning its night hunt. Then, "Mama said vows are for important things. For always." "This is the most important thing," he growled, the emotion raw in his throat, "and this is for always." He felt her little hand, cold as a snowdrop, uncurl from where it was tucked against her chest. Hesitantly, her fingers grasped a fold of his tunic. Not a hug, not trust, but an anchor, a tiny, desperate hold on something solid in her spinning, terrifying world. "Mama's gone," she whispered, and the pain in those two words was a bottomless well. "She got sick, and then it was just him." "Tell me," Kaelin urged gently, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Tell me his name." A long, fearful pause. He could feel her weighing the danger of saying it against the desperate need to finally tell someone. "Gareth," she breathed, the name a curse on her lips. "Uncle Gareth." Gareth. Kaelin filed the name away in a dark, cold corner of his mind. It was a target. It was a sentence. "And he hurt you," Kaelin said. Not a question, but a confirmation. He needed her to say it. He needed to hear the truth from her. Ilara nodded, a tiny movement against him. "I said I was bad, that I made Mama sick, that I ate too much, that I was stupid." Each accusation was a dart, thrown with a child's heartbreaking mimicry of an adult's cruel tone. When he got the black bottles out, his eyes would go funny, and then it would happen. The black bottles. Drink. A coward's poison, unleashing a coward's violence. "The burn, Ilara?" Kaelin asked, his voice barely a whisper, straining to keep the fury out of it. "How did you get the burn?" She went rigid. The trembling increased. For a terrible moment he thought she would shut down completely, retreat into the silent, haunted place she'd been when he found her. His pipe," she choked out. "He said I was in his way. He said I needed to learn to be still." A pipe. A deliberate, torturous press of hot embers against a child's skin. To teach her to be still? Kaelin saw red, literally. A haze of rage clouded his vision. The beast within him, the wolf that was his other half, surged against its chains, howling for release, for hunt, for blood. It took every ounce of his centuries of discipline to keep walking, to keep his hold gentle, to not shift then and there and tear through the forest to find this Gareth and reduce him to scraps. He took a shuddering, controlled breath. The night air was cold in his lungs. "Listen to me, little one," he said, his voice thick with an emotion so powerful it scared even him. "You are not bad. You did not make your mama sick. You are not stupid. You are brave, so incredibly brave. You survived. You ran. That takes more courage than most warriors ever know." She lifted her head just a fraction, her blue eyes glimmering with fresh tears in the moonlight now filtering through the trees. "I was scared." "Being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared," he murmured. "It means you are scared, and you do the right thing anyway. You did the right thing, Ilara. You found me." Ahead, the trees began to thin. The imposing dark silhouette of Stonehaven Keep rose against the star-strewn sky, its tall towers piercing the heavens, its walls seeming to grow from the very mountain itself. Torches flickered at the gates, beacons of safety. Ilara saw them and gasped, her fingers tightening on his tunic. "What is that?" "That is my home. That is where you are safe." "It's a castle," she whispered, awe cutting through her fear. "For a king." "Yes. Are you the king?" He looked down at her, at the dirt-streaked face, the huge, wounded eyes. "I am Kaelin, Lord of the Northern Wastes, King of the Lycans. But to you," he said, his voice softening impossibly, "I am just Kaelin, the man who carried you home." As they approached the massive iron-bound gates, guards snapped to attention. Their eyes widened slightly at the sight of their formidable king carrying a ragged human child, but they said nothing, bowing their heads as he passed. Ilara shrank back, trying to make herself smaller. The inner courtyard was bustling with evening activity, stable hands, soldiers returning from patrol, servants hurrying on errands. All movement stopped as Kaelin strode through. A hushed silence fell, broken only by the crackle of torches and the distant howl of a wolf from the high peaks. All eyes were on them, filled with curiosity, shock, and, for some of the older ones, a dawning, grim understanding. Kaelin ignored them all. His focus was on the large, carved doors of the main keep, and on the woman now standing on the steps, her arms crossed, her sharp healer's eyes missing nothing. Lyra. Her silver-streaked dark hair was tied back severely, and her apron was clean but showed the stains of a long day's work. She took in the scene, the king, the child, the protective, furious set of his shoulders, and her professional mask slipped for just a second, revealing a flash of profound pity and anger. Kaelin mounted the steps and stopped before her. Without preamble, his voice a low, urgent command that brooked no argument, he said, "Lyra, she is injured, malnourished, abused. See to everything." He then looked down at Ilara, who was staring at Lyra with the same terrified suspicion she'd first shown him. "Ilara, this is Lyra. She is the best healer in all the realms. She is kind. I will be right outside the door the entire time. Do you understand?" Ilara's wide, desperate eyes flew back to his face. "You promise? You won't leave?" He knelt, setting her carefully on her feet, but keeping his hands on her thin shoulders. He looked straight into her eyes, letting her see the absolute truth in his. "I swear it on the blood of my ancestors. I am not leaving you." He gave her the smallest, most encouraging nod he could manage. Then he gently guided her forward towards Lyra, whose face had transformed into one of gentle, open warmth. "Hello, little sparrow," Lyra said, her voice like a soft song. "Let's get you warmed up, shall we?" As Lyra led the trembling girl inside, Kaelin rose to his full, imposing height. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced with a frost so cold it could have frozen the torches in their sconces. He turned to the captain of the guard, who had approached silently. "Rorik," Kaelin said, and his voice was no longer that of a man, but of a king, of a predator. "Mobilize the trackers. I want a man found. Name Gareth, surname unknown. Sister died of fever roughly 6 months ago. He lives in one of the border villages. He is to be found, and he is to be brought to me." He leaned in, his gold-flecked eyes glowing in the dark. "Alive, Rorik. He is to be delivered to me breathing. But the journey need not be comfortable. Is that clear?" Captain Rorik, a scarred and grizzled veteran, met his king's gaze and saw the storm there. He simply bowed, his fist over his heart. "Crystal clear, my lord. It will be done." As Rorik strode away barking orders, Kaelin turned back to the closed door of the healing ward. He leaned his back against the cold stone wall beside it, crossing his arms. He would stand there all night if he had to, a silent, unmovable sentinel. Inside was a wounded child. Somewhere out there in the dark was the man who had wounded her, and Kaelin, the so-called monster of the north, stood between them. The hunt had begun, but first the healing. The door to the healing ward closed with a soft, final click, separating Ilara from the giant who had carried her from the forest. A new kind of panic, cold and slick, shot through her. The promise in his eyes had been real, she believed that somehow, but he was gone, replaced by this strange woman and a room that smelled sharply of herbs and bitter medicine. "Now then, little sparrow," Lyra said, her voice still that gentle song. She did not approach, she simply stood by a large, clean basin, pouring warm water from a pitcher. "Let's get you warmed up, shall we? Would you like to sit here?" She gestured to a low stool by a crackling fireplace. Ilara stood frozen, her gaze darting around the room. Shelves lined with jars of mysterious contents, bunches of drying plants, clean bandages rolled neatly. It was orderly, it was safe, so why did her heart hammer against her ribs as if trying to escape? "He said he would stay," she whispered, her voice cracking. "And he is," Lyra said calmly, nodding toward the door. "Right on the other side of that oak. You have the king of the Lycans as your personal guard. Not many can say that." "King," the word echoed. The giant was a king. Uncle Gareth had cursed kings, said they were thieves and tyrants. This one had scars and gentle hands. Slowly, inch by inch, Ilara shuffled to the stool and sat on its very edge, ready to bolt. Lyra brought over the basin, a soft cloth, and a cake of mild soap that smelled of lavender. She knelt before her, moving with a slow, predictable grace that was somehow calming. "May I?" Lyra asked, holding up the cloth. Elara gave a tiny, jerky nod. The warm water on her skin was the first true comfort she had felt in months. Lyra worked with a healer's efficiency, cleaning the dirt from her face, her hands, her arms. But as the grime washed away, the truth underneath was laid bare, and with each new bruise revealed, Lyra's gentle humming stopped. Her breath would hitch just for a fraction of a second before she continued, her touch becoming even more feather-light. A sickly yellow bloom on her shoulder, a fresh purple grip mark around her upper arm, a scattering of small, circular scars on her back, old burns from embers or a tipped candle. Elara sat through it in silence, watching the healer's face. She didn't see the disgust or blame she expected. She saw a deep, sorrowful anger tightly controlled. She saw lips pressed into a thin, white line. Then Lyra reached for her left wrist, which had begun to throb with a deep, ugly pain. The moment the healer's fingers brushed the swollen joint, Elara couldn't stifle a sharp cry. It was a sound of pure animal hurt. Outside the door there was a low growl, a scrape of stone against stone. A shadow blocked the light under the door. He was there. He'd heard. Lyra's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Elara, filled with a new understanding. "Shh, it's all right. I must look at it, little one. I must see how to make it better." Her voice was steady, an anchor in the pain. "Can you be brave for just a moment longer?" Tears streamed down Elara's clean cheeks, but she bit her lip until she tasted copper. Lyra's examination was expert and swift. She palpated the bone, turned the wrist gently, her face grim. "This is broken," she murmured, more to herself than to Elara. "A greenstick fracture, several days old by the looks of it, set poorly if at all." She looked into Elara's eyes. "Did this happen when you fell?" The old automatic lie jumped to her tongue. "I'm clumsy, I fell." But the memory erupted instead. Uncle Gareth's snarling face, his hand catching her as she tried to dodge a blow, the awful, sickening snap as he twisted, the world going white with agony. Her silence was answer enough. Lyra didn't press. She simply arose and gathered supplies, splints, bandages, a pungent salve. "This will help with the pain and the swelling. Then we must set it properly so it heals straight and strong. It will hurt, Sparrow, but it will be a quick hurt, and then the healing can begin. Do you trust me?" Did she? This woman was a stranger, but she was also the first person, besides the Giant King, who had looked at her injuries and not blamed her for them, who saw her pain and wanted to fix it. "Will he come in?" Elara asked, her eyes glued to the door. "If you want him to," Lyra said softly. "He will do whatever you need." She thought of the solid, unmovable presence on the other side of the wood, the vow that rumbled in his chest. She needed that right now. She gave another small nod. Lyra went to the door, opened it just a crack, and spoke in low tones. A moment later, Kalen filled the doorway. He had to duck to enter. The room seemed to shrink around his immense presence, but the wild, predatory intensity from the forest was gone, banked like a fire. His eyes found Elara immediately, and they held only a quiet, ferocious concern. He came and knelt by the stool, putting himself at her level, a solid wall of stability. "Lyra tells me you have been incredibly brave," he said, his voice a soft gravel. "She says you must be even braver for just a moment more. Can I help? Would you like to hold my hand?" He offered it, palm up. It was a hand that could crush stone, scarred and powerful, but it was held perfectly still, an offering of strength. Elara looked from his hand to his eyes, the monster's eyes. They were not monstrous at all. They were the color of the forest at twilight, and right now they held only her. Slowly she placed her small, trembling right hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and secure, a gentle cage that felt like the safest place in the world. "I'm ready," she whispered, to Lyra, to Kalen, to herself. Lyra worked quickly. She applied the cold, numbing salve, then, with precise movements, manipulated the broken bone. The pain was a bright, sharp flare, stealing Elara's breath. A whimper escaped her, and her fingers crushed Kalen's. He didn't flinch. He just held on, his other hand coming up to rest lightly on her hair, a steady, grounding pressure. "Almost there," Lyra muttered, her focus complete. There was a final, sickening pop and grind that made Ilara see stars. Then, blessedly, the sharpest pain began to recede into a deep, throbbing ache. Lyra expertly wrapped the splints and bandages, immobilizing the wrist. "There, all done. The worst is over, little sparrow." Ilara slumped, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. She leaned unconsciously into Kaelin's side, her forehead touching his arm. He went very still, as if she were a wild creature he might startle. Lyra continued her examination. Now with a bowl of nourishing broth she coaxed Ilara to sip. She noted the hollows under her ribs, the prominence of her collarbones, the dry, brittle hair. She documented every mark, her face growing grimmer with each notation on her parchment. Finally, she straightened and looked at Kaelin. The professional report was in her eyes before she spoke. "The findings, my lord," she said, her voice formal now, edged with steel. "Severe malnutrition and dehydration, multiple contusions in varying stages of healing, indicative of repeated, sustained trauma over weeks, likely months. Second-degree thermal burns on the left shoulder and upper back, consistent with contact from a pipe or similar implement. A green stick fracture of the left radius, approximately 4 days old, sustained through torsional trauma." She paused, letting the clinical words hang in the air, their horrifying meaning clear. "This is not discipline. This is systematic torture of a child." The air in the room turned to ice. Kaelin's hand around Ilara's tightened infinitesimally, a spasm of pure rage, before he forced it to relax. Ilara felt the tremor that went through him, a volcano barely contained. He looked down at the top of her head, then back to Lyra. "Can you heal her?" The question was simple, the weight behind it was immense. "The body, yes," Lyra said quietly, "with food, rest, and care. The spirit, that will take time, and safety, and unwavering patience." Her gaze flicked meaningfully to the door, to the world outside where a man named Gareth still breathed. Kaelin gave a single, slow nod. He understood. The healing here was the first step, but true safety, the kind that would let a child's spirit uncurl, required something else. It required justice. Ilara was fading. The broth, the warmth of the fire, the immense relief of the pain in her wrist being tended to, it all conspired with her exhaustion to pull her toward a deep, dark well of sleep. But she fought it, her eyelids fluttering stubbornly. Sleep meant dreams. Dreams meant Uncle Gareth's face in the shadows, his hands reaching. She was nestled in a large plush chair by the hearth now, wrapped in a blanket so soft it felt like a cloud. Kaelin still knelt beside her, a silent, watchful mountain. Lyra was bustling in the background, preparing a sleeping draught. "You should rest, little sparrow. Your body needs to heal." Ilara shook her head, a frantic little motion. "I'm not tired," she lied, her voice slurred. Kaelin watched the fear in her eyes, the fear of the dark, of the vulnerability of unconsciousness. He understood it better than most. The wolf within him hated helplessness too. "Lyra," he said quietly, "the draft, will it give her peaceful dreams?" Lyra met his gaze. "It will encourage deep, healing sleep, but the mind has its own paths, my lord. I cannot promise they will be pleasant." Ilara's breath hitched, a small, broken sound. Kaelin made a decision. He shifted, moving to sit on the floor beside her chair, his back against the stone hearth. The firelight played over the sharp planes of his face. "Then we'll make new paths," he stated, as if it were a simple matter of will. He looked at Ilara. "What did your mama tell you about kings, in her stories?" The question was so unexpected, it cut through Ilara's drowsy panic. She blinked. "Kings? They lived in castles. They had shiny crowns and fought dragons and kept the kingdom safe."
Mama said a good king's heart was heavier than his crown because he carried all his people's worries inside it. Kaelin felt those words land with a profound weight. Your mama was a wise woman. She was, Ilara whispered, fresh tears welling. I miss her. I know, he said, his voice rough with empathy, and I cannot bring her back, but I can make a promise to you, Ilara, here in this room, with the fire and Lyra as witness. I may not fight dragons, but I swear to you, I will keep you safe. Your worry will be in my heart, and I will carry it. Do you believe me? She searched his face, looking for the lie, the trick. She found only fierce, unwavering certainty. You're really a king? I am. Then your promises are important, like vows. The most important. She was silent for a long moment, chewing her lip. The fear and the desperate need to trust warred in her small frame. Uncle Gareth said no one would want me. He said I was too much trouble, that I was broken. The air in the room crackled with Kaelin's suppressed fury. Lyra stopped her movements, her hands curling into fists at her sides. Kaelin leaned forward, capturing Ilara's gaze and holding it. Your uncle is a liar. You're not broken. You are a child who was hurt. There is a world of difference. And trouble? A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. I am the king of the northern wastes. I have dealt with invading armies, ice giants, and courtiers who talk for 3 hours about grain taxes. You, little one, are not trouble. You are, he searched for the right word, one that was true. You are a responsibility I choose, a light in a very dark forest. He saw her absorb this, the terrible, ingrained beliefs beginning to crack under the force of his conviction. Where will I go? She asked, the core of her terror finally laid bare. After I'm healed? I can't go back there. I'd rather go back to the forest and let the wolves get me. You will go nowhere you do not wish to go, Kaelin declared. You will stay here, at Stonehaven. This will be your home, for as long as you want it, for a week, a year, a lifetime. Here? She widened her eyes. In the castle? Yes. With you? If you will have me, and the humility in those words from such a powerful being was staggering. I would be your guardian, your protector, until you are grown and strong and ready to choose your own path. The concept was too vast for her tired mind. A home, a choice, a giant king as a guardian. It swirled around her, beautiful and terrifying. The sleeping draught Lyra had finally persuaded her to sip was pulling her under, making the firelight blur and Kaelin's face soften at the edges. Forever? She mumbled, her words thick. For as long as you need, he repeated, his voice seeming to come from far away. As sleep finally claimed her, her last conscious thought was not of monsters, but of a heavy heart and a shiny crown, and a feeling that felt, for the first time in so very long, like the faintest glimmer of safety. When her breathing evened out into deep sleep, Kaelin carefully lifted her, blanket and all, and carried her to a small, adjacent chamber Lyra had prepared. It was simple, with a narrow bed, but it was clean and warm. He laid her down, tucking the blankets around her. She didn't stir. He stood over her for a long time, watching the faint, worried crease between her brows even in sleep. The evidence of her suffering was now a detailed report in Lyra's hand and a searing brand on his soul. He turned and walked back into the main healing ward. Lyra was waiting, her arms crossed. She will need constant care, Kaelin, Lyra said, dropping the formalities in the privacy of the room. This is not a whim. This is a commitment to raise a deeply traumatized child. The nights will be hard, the days will have setbacks. She will be afraid of you again. She will have rage you cannot comprehend. I know, he said, his voice low. Do you? Lyra pressed, her healer's compassion now mixed with a friend's bluntness. You are a warrior, a king, a Lycan. Your world is one of dominance, power, and swift justice. Hers is now a world of whispers, of patience, of learning that a raised voice does not mean a raised fist. Can you be that for her, the soft place to fall? Kaelin looked toward the closed door of the child's room. He thought of her hand in his, so fragile he could feel every tiny bone. He thought of her flinching from a pipe's burn. He thought of the sheer, stupid courage it took to run into a monster-haunted wood. "I have spent centuries building walls, Lyra," he said slowly. "Walls of stone, walls of fear, walls of strength. Perhaps it is time I learned how to build a hearth instead." Lyra studied him, then finally gave a slow, approving nod. "Then we begin. But part of building that hearth is ensuring no one can ever knock it down." Her eyes were hard. "Gareth." At the name, the warmth left Kaelin's expression. The king re-emerged, sharp and lethal. "Yes, Gareth." "The trackers?" "Are hunting as we speak. And when they bring him, then he will stand before me. He will answer for every bruise, every burn, every night of terror he inflicted. He will learn the difference between the violence of a coward and the justice of a king." He left the healing ward then, pausing once more outside Ilara's door. The silent sentinel was gone, replaced by a general preparing for war, a war for the peace of one small girl. He strode to his study, a room of dark wood and maps of his territories. On the large desk sat not treaties or battle plans, but a single, fresh piece of parchment. He sat, took up a quill, and began to write. Not a royal decree, not a warrant. He wrote a simple, horrifying list. Left wrist, fracture. Right shoulder, burn. Upper arm, contusion, fingerprint bruising. Lower back, old scar tissue, cigarette burns. Malnourishment, dehydration. Night terrors. He wrote every injury Lyra had documented. He made it a charge sheet, a testament. With each word his resolve hardened into something cold, immovable, and utterly ruthless. The monster in the forest had saved a child. Now the king in the castle would destroy the monster who created her, and he would do it by the law, a law that for the first time felt deeply personally his. 3 days. For 3 days, Stonehaven Keep held its breath around a small, silent girl. Ilara existed in a bubble of soft voices, warm broth, and gentle hands. She slept fitfully in the little room off the healing ward, and when she was awake, she was a ghost, watching, listening, jumping at sudden sounds. Kaelin visited often. He didn't speak much. Sometimes he just sat in the corner, a looming but quiet presence, whittling a piece of wood into a shapeless form. Sometimes he read aloud from heavy books, tales of ancient heroes and clever animals, his deep voice rolling through the room like distant thunder. Ilara would watch him from her nest of blankets, her eyes tracking his every move, still wary but no longer frozen in outright terror. On the morning of the 4th day, as pale winter light filtered through the high window, she spoke to him directly for the first time without being prompted. "Your people are scared of you," she said, her voice a small rasp. "What makes you say that?" Kaelin paused, looking up. "I hear them, in the hallway. Their voices get quiet when you walk. Their footsteps hurry." He considered this, a slight frown on his face. "They are not scared of me, Ilara. They are respectful of the office I hold, the crown, and perhaps they are wary of my temper. I do not suffer fools or treachery lightly." "Like your uncle Gareth," she stated, and it wasn't a question. The wood in Kaelin's hand gave a faint crack. He carefully set it down. "Yes, like him." She pulled her knees to her chest, her good arm wrapping around them. "The man with the wolf on his shirt, Rorik, he came and talked to Lyra outside last night. They said they found the trail." Kaelin went very still. He had given orders for no such discussions to happen near her, but the keep had ears, and children, especially those who had learned to survive by listening, had sharper ones. "He did," Kaelin admitted, seeing no point in a lie that would fracture the fragile trust being built. Is he coming here?" The fear was back, a living thing in the room, tightening her shoulders, dilating her pupils. Kaelin moved from the chair to kneel on the floor closer to her, maintaining the lower position. Listen to me. If he is brought here, it will be in chains. He will be in the darkest, deepest cell beneath this keep, guarded by my most loyal warriors. He will be powerless, and you will be here, surrounded by stone walls 5 feet thick, with me between you and any door. Do you understand the difference? You are no longer a child hiding in a cupboard in his house. You are a ward of the king in his fortress. The power has changed hands, Ilara. It is now yours, it is now mine, and we do not yield it to men like him. He spoke with such absolute, unshakable conviction that some of the tension leaked from her small frame. She studied him, the sheer physical mass of him, the quiet authority that seemed to radiate from his very core. He was more solid than any wall. "What will you do to him?" she whispered. "That," Kaelin said, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone, "will be decided by our laws. He will have a trial, he will face the evidence, and he will be judged, not by my anger, but by the justice of this land."
A trial? The concept was foreign. In her world, Uncle Gareth was judge, jury, and executioner. Yes, where he can speak and others can speak against him. It is fair. She was quiet for a long time. Mama said fair isn't always kind. Kaelin sighed. Sometimes fairness is harsh, but it is always better than the alternative, cruelty without reason. Far from the stone walls and firelight, in a squalid village clinging to the frozen edge of Kaelin's territory, the hunt was reaching its end. Captain Rorik moved through the muddy streets like a shadow, though he was a bear of a man. 2 of his best trackers flanked him. They had followed the trail from the forest's edge, the story told by broken twigs, a discarded hair ribbon, the faint, fading scent of a child's fear. It led them to a dilapidated hut on the village's outskirts, where the smell of rot and cheap ale hung in the air. No neighbors looked out their windows. They knew better. Rorik didn't bother knocking. He placed a heavy-booted foot against the flimsy door and kicked. The wood splintered inward with a crash. The scene inside was one of foul neglect. Empty bottles littered the floor. The hearth was cold, and in a chair, snoring loudly, slumped a man, Gareth. He was thinner than Kaelin might have imagined, with a mean, pinched face, even in sleep. He jerked awake, blinking bleary, bloodshot eyes. "Who are you? Get out of my house," he slurred, struggling to his feet, his hand fumbling for a rusty poker by the fireplace. Rorik was across the room in 2 strides. He didn't draw his sword, he simply backhanded the man with a closed fist, a blow that held all the pent-up fury of a father who had seen Ilara's bruises. Gareth crumpled like a sack of grain, hitting the floor with a thud, a tooth skittering across the grimy stones. Rorik stood over him, his voice a low, deadly growl. "Gareth, by order of King Kaelin, Lord of the Northern Wastes, you are under arrest for the torture and abuse of a child." Gareth's eyes, swimming with pain and confusion, widened in genuine shock. "Child? What child? I don't know what your niece, Ilara." The name seemed to sober him with a jolt of terror. The bluster returned, laced with panic. "That lying little witch! She ran off, stole from me, she did. I've been worried sick. You bring her back here, You will never see her again," Rorik interrupted, his tone freezing the words in Gareth's throat. "You are coming with us. The king wishes to have words with you." At a nod from Rorik, the trackers hauled Gareth to his feet, binding his wrists with coarse, thick rope. They were not gentle. They cinched the bonds tight enough to bite into his flesh, a small, sharp preview of the justice to come. As they dragged him from the hovel, Gareth began to struggle in earnest, his cries shifting from anger to a whining, desperate fear. "You can't do this. I'm a free man. She's my blood, my property. You have no right." Rorik turned, his face a mask of cold contempt. He leaned in close, his breath fogging in the frigid air.
Your property is under the king's protection now, and you have no rights, not anymore. Every scream you silenced, every bruise you left, every tear she cried, they are your charges now. And let me tell you something, he added, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more frightening than a shout. The king is not known for his mercy, but he is known for his justice, and for men like you, they are often the same thing. They threw him on the back of a waiting horse, tying him securely. As they rode out of the village, the few villagers who dared peek from behind shutters watched in silence. No one raised a voice in protest, no one even looked surprised. The monster who had haunted their edges, the one they had been too fearful or too indifferent to confront, was being taken by a greater power. A colder, more formidable monster, some whispered, but as they watched the party disappear into the gathering twilight, heading toward the ominous peaks where Stonehaven stood, a different thought occurred to some. Perhaps the monster in the mountains wasn't the one to fear. Perhaps he was the one who hunted the real beasts. Back in her small room, Alara suddenly sat bolt upright in bed, a gasp tearing from her throat. Kaelin, who had been reading by the fire, was at her side in an instant. "Ilara, what is it? A dream?" She trembled, her eyes wide and unfocused. She shook her head, not in denial, but in confusion. She pressed a small hand to her chest. "I felt cold, and I heard a bad man crying." A chill that had nothing to do with the draft slipped down Kaelin's spine. He exchanged a look with Lyra, who had just entered. A Lycan's connection to their pack was profound, a thread of sense and emotion. Could a bond born of desperate protection and a sacred vow already be forming something similar, something that let a wounded child feel the moment her tormentor was captured? He placed a large, warm hand on her small, cold one on her chest. "The cold is gone," he said firmly, pouring warmth and certainty into his voice. "You promise?" She looked up at him, her blue eyes searching his. He didn't smile. He simply met her gaze, letting her see the unvarnished truth. "On my life, on my crown, on the vow I made you by this fire, I promise." Outside, under a moon obscured by scudding clouds, a bound man wept on the long, hard road to judgment, and inside thick stone walls, a king held a child's hand, building a fortress of promises to keep the coming storm at bay. The dungeons of Stonehaven were not a place of shrieking rats and dripping water. They were clean, dry, and utterly silent, a silence more oppressive than any noise. It was the sound of hope dying a slow, cold death. Deep in the most secure cell, lit by a single magical orb that cast no warmth, Gareth huddled on a stone bench, his bindings now replaced with heavy manacles chained to the wall. He had stopped crying. Now a simmering, petulant rage boiled inside. This was a mistake, a huge, stupid mistake. That ungrateful brat had spun tales, and this so-called king had believed him. He'd be let go. He had to be. He was the wronged party. He took in his sister's brat out of the goodness of his heart, and this was his thanks? The scrape of a key in the massive lock made him flinch. The door swung open silently. King Kaelin filled the doorway. He wasn't wearing his crown or royal robes, just simple dark leathers. It made him look even more like a warrior, a predator who had stepped off a battlefield. He carried no weapon, but he didn't need one. His presence was weapon enough. He stepped inside, and the door closed behind him with a soft, final thud.
Gareth scrambled to his feet, the chains clanking. "Finally, you've come to your senses. This is an outrage. I am a loyal subject, and I demand—" Silence. The word was not loud. It was a low, resonant command that vibrated in the stone and seemed to suck the very breath from Gareth's lungs. It held a power that was not human. Gareth's mouth snapped shut. Kaelin walked forward, his movements slow, deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, just outside the length of the chains. He simply looked at Gareth,
his gold-flecked eyes taking in every detail, the weak chin, the shifting, deceitful eyes, the hands that had inflicted so much pain. He saw not a man, but a disease. "You are Gareth," Kaelin stated, his voice flat. "Yes, and I have rights. That child, Ilara, she's a liar, a thief. She's troubled. My sister spoiled her rotten, and—" "I did not ask you to speak." Kaelin's gaze sharpened, and Gareth felt a primal fear, ancient and deep, crawl up his spine. "You will speak when I permit you. You will answer what I ask. You will tell the truth. If you lie to me," Kaelin continued, taking a single step closer, "I will know, and the consequences will make you wish for the gentle mercy of this cell." Gareth's bravado evaporated, leaving a cold, greasy sweat in its place. He nodded jerkily. Kaelin reached into his tunic and drew out a folded piece of parchment. He unfolded it slowly, the sound obscenely loud in the quiet. "This," Kaelin said, holding it up, "is a list. It is a list of injuries documented by my head healer, Lyra, upon Ilarba's arrival. Would you like me to read it to you?" Gareth paled but said nothing. "Very well." Kaelin's eyes dropped to the page, but his voice was directed straight at the cowering man. "Contusion, left zygomatic arch, a black eye, 3 days old. Patterned bruising, right upper arm, consistent with adult male grip." He looked up. "Do you recall how she earned the black eye, Gareth?" "Shh, she fell. She's clumsy." Kaelin's expression didn't change. He looked back at the list. "Second-degree thermal burns, left shoulder and scapula. Configuration suggests repeated, deliberate application of a cylindrical heat source." His eyes, glacier cold, lifted again. Her uncle's pipe, perhaps? Did she get in its way often? "It was an accident. She startled me." Green stick fracture, left radius. Evidence of torsional trauma, a twisting force. Kaelin's voice grew quieter, more deadly. "Did her wrist twist when she fell, Gareth, or when you grabbed her as she tried to get away from you?" Gareth was shaking now. "You have no proof. It's her word against mine. She's a child." "Ah, but it's not." Kaelin refolded the parchment carefully. "It is her word, and the word of her broken bones, and her burned skin, and her malnourished body. The body does not lie, Gareth. It keeps a perfect record, and your record is one of profound, repeated cruelty." "She needed discipline," Gareth shrieked, the last of his composure breaking. "She was willful, ungrateful, eating my food, living under my roof. Someone had to control her." "Control," Kaelin repeated. The word dripped with disdain. "You are a weak, pathetic creature. You could not control your own temper, your own drinking, your own miserable life, so you sought to control something smaller and weaker, to feel powerful. It is the oldest, saddest story of cowardice there is." He took another step, now well within the arc of the chains. Gareth shrank back against the wall. Kaelin loomed over him, not with shouted accusations, but with a quiet, terrifying intensity. "I have seen real monsters, Gareth. I have fought beasts that could tear this castle apart with their bare claws. I have looked into the eyes of demons. But you," Kaelin said, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to freeze the very air, "you are something else. You are the kind of evil that wears a human face, the kind that betrays trust, that preys on the innocent in their own home. And for that," Kaelin said, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to freeze the very air, "there is a special place in my justice." What are you going to do to me?" Gareth whimpered, true terror now in his eyes. "You will stand trial, tomorrow. You will hear these charges read before my council. You will be given a chance to speak in your own defense." A grim, humorless smile touched Kaelin's lips. "I suggest you think carefully about what you say." He turned and walked back to the door. As he reached the handle, he paused, not looking back. "One more thing," Kaelin said, his voice echoing softly in the stone chamber. "She is not troubled. She is brave. She is not a liar. She is a survivor. And she is no longer yours. She is under my protection, the protection of the monster you fear. Remember that when you lie awake tonight in the dark. The thing you created, a child strong enough to run from you, has brought down upon you the wrath of a king. Sleep well, Gareth." The door opened and closed, leaving Gareth alone in the piercing, silent cold. The king's words circled in his mind like vultures. The wrath of a king, the monster's protection. He slid down the wall to the floor, the manacles biting into his wrists, and for the first time he truly understood. He was not getting out. The little bird had flown to a far more dangerous nest, and the hawk that ruled it had his scent. Up in the healing ward, Ilara was having a good day. She had eaten all her porridge. She had let Lyra change her bandages without a whimper. She was even coloring on a piece of parchment with some charcoal Kaelin had given her. She looked up as he entered, his usual large, calm presence returning. She searched his face. He looked the same, but there was a stillness about him, a sense of something settled. "Did you see him?" she asked, her voice very small. Kaelin walked over and sat in his usual chair. "I did. Is he scared?" Kaelin met her gaze honestly. "Yes, Ilara. He is very scared." A complex emotion flitted across her face, not satisfaction, not quite, but a profound, weary sense of validation. The giant who had terrified her was now terrifying the man who had terrified her. The world had turned upside down. "Good," she whispered, and went back to her drawing, her strokes a little firmer. Kaelin watched her, the cold fury from the dungeon slowly melting away in the face of her fragile resilience. The trial was necessary, justice was required, but this small moment of peace, of a child feeling safe enough to express a blunt truth, this was the point of it all. This was the hearth he was building, and tomorrow he would remove the last lingering shadow that threatened its flame. The great hall of Stonehaven was not made for comfort, it was made for awe. Vaulted stone ceilings disappeared into shadow high above. Banners of forgotten campaigns hung, faded and still. At the far end, on a dais, sat not an ornate throne, but a massive chair carved from a single black basalt sheet, the stone seat. It was here that Kaelin held his most solemn councils and passed his most severe judgments. Today the hall was not full. Only the necessary few were present. Kaelin on the stone seat, Lyra standing to his right, a scroll in her hands, Captain Rorik and 2 guards flanking the prisoner, and a few senior members of the council, their faces grim. The air was thick with a heavy, waiting silence.
Ilara was not there. Kaelin had been adamant. She was in her room with a trusted, kind-hearted maid, instructed to play and rest. She would not have to face those cruel eyes again. The doors groaned open. Gareth was led in. His chains were placed with lighter bindings for the proceedings, but he was a pitiful sight. Pale, unshaven, trembling. The immense, grim hall and the silent, powerful figures within it crushed what little spirit he had left. His eyes darted around like a trapped rodent's before finally landing on Kaelin. He flinched. "Bring the accused forward." Kaelin's voice rang out, clear and emotionless, filling the vast space. Rorik guided Gareth to stand before the dais. The man's knees knocked together. Kaelin looked down at him, his face an impassive mask of stone. "Gareth, you stand accused before this council of grievous crimes against your kin, the child Ilara. Crimes of physical torture, neglect, and sustained cruelty. How do you answer?" Gareth swallowed, his throat clicking. He had rehearsed lies all night.
But under the weight of that gaze, in the face of this terrifying formality, the words crumbled. I am her uncle. I took her in. I fed her. She's difficult. She lies." Kaelin didn't react. He merely glanced at Lyra. Lyra stepped forward, unrolling her scroll. Her voice, usually so gentle, was crisp and clinical, cutting through the hall like a surgeon's blade. "I, Lyra, head healer of Stonehaven, present my findings upon the examination of the child Alara, 4 days past." She began to read. Not just the list of injuries, but the detailed descriptions, the size and shape of each bruise, the estimated age, the likely instrument, the degree of the burns, the mechanics of the broken bone. She described the severe malnourishment, the signs of chronic fear and stress. With each precise, unemotional detail, Gareth seemed to shrink. This wasn't hysterical accusation. This was evidence, laid bare with cold, scientific certainty. The council members shifted, their expressions growing darker, their eyes hardening as they looked at the prisoner. When Lyra finished, the silence was deafening. Kaelin spoke again. "You claim she lies. Do you dispute the healer's findings, that these injuries exist?" She must have done them to herself, to get attention," Gareth blurted, a last desperate gambit. One of the elder councilmen, a white-haired Lycan named Alistair, with eyes like chips of flint, spoke for the first time, his voice dripping with disdain. "Does a child give herself patterned grip bruises on her own upper arm, fracture her own wrist through torsion, apply a hot pipe to her own back? Are you truly so foolish as to think we are?" Gareth had no answer. He hung his head. "The evidence is incontrovertible," Kaelin stated, the finality in his tone leaving no room for argument. "The law of the Northern Wastes is clear. For the intentional harm of a child, for torture and neglect, the penalty is exile, permanent exile from all Lycan territories. If you ever set foot on these lands again, if you ever attempt to contact or approach the child Alara again, the penalty is immediate death. Exile." Gareth's head snapped up. Not death. A spark of wretched hope flickered in his eyes. Exile he could survive. He could go south, start over. However, Kaelin's voice sliced through that hope. Exile is not a pardon. It is a continued sentence. You will be taken to our southmost border, beyond the bleak mountains, and released with nothing but the clothes on your back. Your name and your crimes will be sent ahead to the human kingdoms. They will know what you are. You will be an outcast among outcasts. The spark died. To be cast out with a reputation as a child torturer, no village would take him, no lord would give him work. He would be a pariah, prey for bandits and beasts, destined to die starving and alone in a ditch. It was a death sentence, just a slower, more desolate one. "No, please, Your Majesty, have mercy. I'll change. I'm her only family." Gareth fell to his knees, his voice a ragged sob. Kaelin rose from the stone seat. He descended the dais steps, stopping before the weeping man. He did not shout. His quiet words were for Gareth alone, but they carried in the silent hall. "Mercy." Kaelin's whisper was colder than the mountain winds. "You speak to me of mercy. Where was your mercy when she cried for her mother? Where was your mercy when you pressed fire into her skin? You showed her a world without mercy, and now, by our law, I show you one. You are exiled from the world of the innocent. You are condemned to the world you helped create, a world of cruelty and indifference. That is not my vengeance, Gareth. That is your own, returned to you." He turned his back, a gesture of utter dismissal, and walked back to the stone seat. He did not sit. He stood before it, a king pronouncing judgment. "By the power vested in me, and by the laws of this land, I so decree it. Captain Rorik, see it done. By dawn tomorrow he is to be beyond the bleak pass." Rorik bowed. "It will be done, my lord." As the guards hauled a sobbing, broken Gareth away, the council members bowed and filed out, their duty complete. Soon, only Kaelin and Lyra remained in the vast, empty hall. The mask of the king slowly slipped from Kaelin's face. He placed a hand on the back of the basalt chair, his head bowed. The weight of the crown, the weight of the judgment pressed down on him. "You gave him the law's sentence, not your own," Lyra said softly, coming to stand beside him. "Was it?" Kaelin's voice was tired. "A part of me wanted to tear him apart, to give him a taste of the fear he gave her. That would have been justice too. Simpler, cleaner. But then you would have been the monster he claims you are. And more importantly, you would have been the monster Alara first feared you were. You showed him today, without her even being here, that justice can be fair, that it can be cold and hard, but it follows rules. It is not the wild, random cruelty she knew. That is a lesson she needs to learn even more than she needs to see him suffer." Kaelin took a deep breath, the cold, still air of the hall filling his lungs. "I told him yes," he said. "She asked if he was scared. And now he is gone, truly gone, not just from her sight, but from her world. The shadow is lifted, Kaelin. Now the true healing can begin." He nodded, finally turning from the throne. The business of kings was done for the day. Now for the business of a guardian. "How is she?" "Quiet, but she asked for you twice. I think she sensed today was important." Kaelin left the Hall of Judgment and made his way back to the rooms that now felt more like home than any grand chamber. When he entered, Alara was at the small table, her drawing before her. It was a crude but recognizable sketch, a big, dark shape next to a very small one, under what might have been a sun or perhaps a crown. She looked up as he entered. She didn't ask about the trial. She simply studied his face, her young eyes missing little. "You look tired," she said. He managed a smile, genuine smile. Kings have long days. "Did you do the right thing?" she asked, her question profound in its simplicity. He knelt beside her chair, looking at her drawing. "I followed the law. I protected what was mine to protect. That is the right thing for a king to do." She considered this, then pointed to the big shape in her drawing. "That's you, and that's me," she pointed to the small one. "We're outside, in the sun, not in the forest." Kaelin's heart, so heavy moments before, gave a strange, warm lurch. She was drawing a future without shadows. "It's a beautiful picture," he said, his voice rough. "The most beautiful I've ever seen." Outside, the first true snow of winter began to fall, silently blanketing the mountains, covering the old tracks, making everything clean and new. The snow changed everything. It fell for 2 days and 2 nights, a relentless, silent blanket that hushed the world and buried the last of the autumn decay under a pristine white. For Alara, watching from the high window of the healing ward, it was pure magic. She had seen snow before, of course, in the muddy, gray piles by Garrett's hut, but this was different. This was an entire world transformed into something clean, soft, and breathtakingly beautiful. It also marked a turning point. Lyra, with a final check of her wrist and a satisfied nod, declared her well enough to leave the ward. "Your bones are knitting, little sparrow. Your body needs movement now, and fresh air. But you must stay warm," she insisted, bundling Alara into a borrowed woolen tunic and leggings that were comically large, and a fur-lined cloak that dragged on the floor. Kaelin arrived to escort her to her new chambers. He took one look at the tiny figure drowning in fabric, and a faint, unfamiliar sound escaped him, a resty chuckle. "We will have the tailors see you tomorrow," he said, his eyes crinkling at the edges. "But for now, you look very warm." He didn't carry her this time. He simply offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, her small fingers slipped into his, and he led her through the labyrinthine corridors of Stonehaven. She stared in wide-eyed wonder at the tapestries depicting wolves and winter scenes, at the sheer, staggering size of it all. Her new room was not in the main healing ward. It was a small, cozy chamber in the family wing, connected by a private door to Kaylin's own vast suite. It had a real bed with a thick down mattress and a patchwork quilt, a small carved wooden chest for belongings, a bookshelf, empty for now, and a window that looked out over the inner courtyard, where the snow was piled in perfect white drifts. This is for me?" Ilara whispered, her voice full of awe. "All of it," Kaylin said, standing in the doorway. "You may fill the shelves, paint the walls if you wish. It is yours." The concept of owning a space, a safe space, was overwhelming. She walked in slowly, running her hand over the smooth wood of the bedpost, the soft quilt. She went to the window and gazed out. "Can I go outside?" she asked, her breath fogging the glass. "In the snow?" Kaylin considered. The keep was secure. The walls were corded. The danger was exiled beyond the mountains. "Yes," he said, "but we must get you proper boots first." The tailors came that afternoon, a flurry of pins and soft fabrics and gentle questions. Ilara endured the measuring with quiet patience, still unnerved by the attention but trusting in Kaylin's presence as he sat nearby reviewing scrolls. By evening, a pair of sturdy fur-lined boots and a smaller, properly fitted cloak and tunic were delivered. The next morning, after breakfast, Kaylin found her already dressed, her good hand pressed against the window, watching the courtyard where a few pack children were already building a lumpy snow figure. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes bright with a nervous excitement he had never seen in her before. They stepped out into the crisp, biting air. The world was blindingly bright and utterly silent. She took a deep, sharp breath, the cold stinging her lungs. She took a few tentative steps, her new boots crunching satisfyingly into the untouched snow at the edge of the path. She stopped, crouched down, and with her unbandaged hand, scooped up a handful of the white powder. She stared at it as it melted in her palm, a look of pure wonder on her face. Then she looked up at Kaylin and she smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was a small, tentative, fragile thing, but it was real. It was the first true smile he had ever seen on her face, and it hit him with more force than any battle axe ever had. It was a crack in the ice of her sorrow, a glimpse of the child she was meant to be. "It's so quiet," she whispered. "The snow swallows sound," he said, his own voice hushed in the stillness. "It makes the world new." She nodded, as if this made perfect sense. She began to walk, making a careful line of footprints beside his much larger ones. They walked the perimeter of the courtyard, the winter sun weak but bright. They passed the other children, who paused in their play to stare. Ilara shrank a little closer to Kaylin's side, but she didn't hide. One of the children, a boy with fiery red hair, called out, "Hello, who are you?" Ilara froze. Kaylin felt her grip on his fingers tighten. He was about to answer for her when she took a tiny, brave breath. "I'm Ilara," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper on the wind. "I'm Finn," the boy said cheerfully, undeterred. "We're making a snow wolf. Want to help?" Ilara looked up at Kaylin, her eyes a question mark. He gave a slight encouraging nod. I have a broken wrist," she said, holding up her bandaged arm as if it were an apology. Finn shrugged. "You can pack snow with one hand. Come on." And just like that, she was pulled gently into the circle of children. Kaylin watched from a distance, leaning against a stone archway, as she stood stiffly at first, then slowly began to pat snow onto the growing, misshapen wolf with her good hand. She didn't speak much, but she listened, and she smiled that small smile again when the wolf's head toppled off to general laughter. It was a simple moment, a mundane scene, but for Kaylin it was a victory more significant than any won on a battlefield. She was outside, she was playing, she was interacting with other children without fear choking her. The fortress of his protection was holding, and within its walls a flower was daring to bloom. Later, as the gray afternoon began to darken, they walked back inside, her cheeks rosy with cold, her cloak damp with snow. She was quiet again, but it was a thoughtful, peaceful quiet. As they reached the door to her chamber, she stopped and looked up at him. Finn said the snow wolf was a guardian, that they protect the keep in winter. That is an old story, Kaelin said. Is it true? All the best stories have truth in them, he replied. The idea of a guardian is true, someone who watches, who protects. She was silent for a moment, then said, "You're my guardian." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact, as solid to her now as the stone walls around them. "Yes," he said, his heart full, "I am." That night, for the first time, Ilara did not have a nightmare. She dreamed of quiet snow and lopsided snow wolves, and of walking beside a giant in a world made new and clean.
In his own chamber, Kaelin stood by his window, looking out at the moonlit snow covering the tracks of the past. The exile was complete. The threat was gone. The first smile had been given. The hardest part, he knew, was over. Now began the slow, patient, beautiful work of building a life, not just a safe one, a happy one. The lost child was lost no more. She was home, and her guardian king, standing watch in the silent night, finally allowed himself to believe it. The snow melted, revealing a world of mud and stubborn, frost-bitten grass. Inside Stonehaven, however, a different kind of thaw was occurring. Alara's world, once confined to a single room, began to expand like a slowly opening flower. Her wrist healed, the bandages coming off to reveal pale, thin skin, but unbroken. The tailor delivered more clothes that actually fit, soft wool dresses in deep greens and blues, not the drab gray rags she'd arrived in. She had a routine now. Breakfast with Kaelin and his solar, lessons with Master Alden in the library, afternoons for drawing or, if the weather permitted, short walks in the courtyard with Finn and the other children. The library was her sanctuary. It was a vast, hushed cavern of a room, smelling of dust, old parchment, and beeswax. Sunlight streamed through high, narrow windows, illuminating dancing motes of dust. Master Alden, the keeper, was a wisp of a man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose and a voice like turning pages. He had infinite patience. Elara's education had been scraps from her mother, letters, simple sums, and songs. It was haphazard and had stopped completely after her mother's death. In Master Alden's library, she was starting from the beginning, and the sheer scope of what she didn't know was both terrifying and thrilling. "The world is made of stories, child," Master Alden said one morning, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "And every story is built with words, so we start with the bricks, letters." She learned quickly. Hunger for knowledge, it turned out, could be as powerful as hunger for food. Within weeks, she was piecing together simple sentences. She would sit at the large oak table, her tongue poking out in concentration, carefully copying letters onto a slate. Kaelin would sometimes find her there, hunched in a pool of sunlight, so absorbed she didn't hear him enter. One afternoon, about a month after her arrival, she was looking for a book Master Alden had mentioned, a simple bestiary with pictures. The library was organized in a way that made sense only to Alden, and she was wandering the deeper, darker aisles between towering shelves when she heard voices. They were low, serious, coming from a recessed alcove ahead. "Cannot be sure, my lord, but the rumors from the south are persistent." It was Captain Rourke's voice, grim. "What do they say?" That was Kaelin. His tone was calm, but it had an edge that made Alara freeze, pressing herself against the cold spines of the books. "They say Gareth did not make it through the bleak pass." A beat of silence. Alara's heart thumped painfully against her ribs. "The winter was harsh. Bandits, wolves. It is not unexpected," Kaelin replied, but his voice was thoughtful, not dismissive. "Aye, my lord, it is the manner of the rumor that is troubling. Travelers speak of a man found frozen, yes,
but they whisper he was not alone when he died, that there were tracks around him, not wolf, not human. Ilara's blood ran cold. Not wolf, not human. The words echoed in the silent library. Lycan? Kaelin asked, his voice dropping even lower. The description is vague, large, bipedal, vicious. It could be a rogue from a distant pack, or, Rorik hesitated, or it could be a story, growing in the telling. The tale of the exiled child abuser makes for a good campfire ghost. People may be adding claws and fangs to make it more satisfying. Or someone may be ensuring he never speaks again, Kaelin mused, his voice a dangerous rumble. Who would want Uncle Garrett silent? What could he possibly have known? Her mind raced, conjuring images of shadowy figures with claws in the snowy pass. We have no proof of anything but a dead man in a storm, my lord, Rorik said, his voice firming up. Perhaps, Kaelin said, but he didn't sound convinced. Double the patrols on the southern border, Rorik, and keep this between us. I will not have fear-mongering whispers unsettling the keep. There is a child here who needs peace, not more ghosts. Understood, my lord. Ilara heard the scrape of chairs. Panic licked at her. She couldn't be found here, eavesdropping. She turned and fled on silent feet, ducking behind a shelf just as the two men emerged from the alcove and strode away down another aisle. She stood there in the dark, her back against the books, shaking. Uncle Gareth was dead. The thought should have brought relief, and a part of her did feel a heavy, dark stone lift from her chest. But the way they spoke, tracks, not human, someone who wanted his silence. A new fear, cold and formless, slithery into the space the old one had vacated. What if Uncle Gareth's cruelty wasn't random? What if it was connected to something bigger, something darker? What if his death wasn't an end, but a beginning? She found the bestiary book with trembling hands and brought it to Master Alden, but she couldn't focus on the pictures of griffins and dragons. All she could see were imaginary tracks in the snow. That evening at supper she was quiet, pushing her food around her plate. Kaelin watched her. "The library was quiet today?" he asked casually. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Master Alden is very patient." "He is. You are learning quickly. He tells me you have a keen mind." She just shrugged. After a long silence, she dared to ask, her voice small, "Is the South very dangerous?" Kaelin's fork stilled for a fraction of a second. "The South is many things. Some parts are dangerous, some are beautiful. Why do you ask?" "I read in a book about the bleak mountains." The lie tasted sour, but she couldn't tell him she'd been listening. "Ah," he said, his expression neutral. "They are well named. A harsh, lonely place, not somewhere for people to dwell. A good, natural border. A good place for someone to disappear," she thought. She looked at his face, at the careful control there. He was keeping the rumors from her, protecting her. But the protection now felt like a wall she was on the wrong side of, keeping secrets in as much as dangers out. That night the nightmares returned, not of Gareth's face or his hands, but of endless, trackless snow and something moving in it, something with glowing eyes that was neither wolf nor man, coming closer and closer. She woke with a stifled scream, her nightshirt soaked with cold sweat. The door connecting her room to Kaelin's opened almost instantly. He was there, a solid silhouette in the doorway with his face etched in concern in the moonlight from her window. "Ilara? A dream?" She couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed, not touching her, just being present. "The snow again?" he asked gently, thinking of her earlier question. She shook her head. "Something in the snow," she choked out. "Something was coming."
He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, his voice a steady, sure anchor in the dark, "Listen to me. Nothing is coming for you. The doors are locked. The walls are high. The guards are vigilant. And I am here." He leaned forward slightly.
I will always be between you and anything in the snow, Elara. Always. She wanted to believe him. She desperately did. But the whispers in the library clung to her, colder than any nightmare. The monster she knew was gone, but the conversation had planted a terrifying seed. What if there were other monsters, and what if they weren't just in stories? She finally let him tuck the blankets back around her, his large hands impossibly gentle. But as she closed her eyes, listening to his retreating footsteps, she made a silent vow of her own. She would learn. She would read every book in the library. She would become strong and smart. She would not just be the child who needed protecting. She would learn to protect herself. Because the world, she was starting to understand, held more shadows than even a king could always see. Spring came to the mountains not with a gentle thaw, but with a riotous, noisy victory. Torrents of meltwater carved new paths down the cliffs, and the world erupted in shades of vibrant green and wildflower purple. With the new season, a subtle shift took hold in Elara. The haunted look in her eyes softened, replaced more often by a spark of curiosity, though the library whispers still lingered in her quiet moments. Her body filled out with regular meals, her cheeks losing their hollowed look. She grew an inch, prompting another visit from the tailors. But the most profound change was one no one could see. It began with small things. Kaelin would have a sudden, sharp headache, and moments later, Elara would come to him, her small face pinched, asking if he was all right. Once, when she scraped her knee in the courtyard, Kaelin, who was in a council meeting 3 halls away, felt a jolt of sharp, surprising pain in his own leg. He dismissed it as an old wound acting up, until Lyra mentioned the child's minor accident later. Then came the dreams, not just Elara's nightmares, but shared impressions. Kaelin dreamt not of battles or strategy, but of feeling impossibly small, hiding in a dark space that smelled of mothballs and fear, the cupboard. He woke with the taste of salt tears in his throat and a certainty that wasn't his own. He found Elara already awake that morning, sitting silently by her window, staring at the dawn with a deep, old sadness. "You dreamt of the cupboard," he said softly from her doorway, not a question. She turned, her eyes wide with shock. "How did you know?" He had no answer. He was a Lycan, connected to his pack with faint, empathic threads, a sense of mood, of danger. But this was different. It was vivid, intrusive. It was as if her deepest fears and memories were bleeding through an invisible wall into his own mind. He consulted Lyra in private, his expression troubled. Is it possible? A bond with a human child? Lyra, ever pragmatic, stirred a medicinal tea. "You pledged yourself as her guardian with the fervor of a blood oath, Kaelin. You poured your will, your magic, your very essence into that vow. The Lycan spirit is potent. It seeks connection. In the absence of a blood tie, it may have forged one, a guardian bond. It is rare but not unheard of, with foundlings taken deeply into the heart of the pack." "She feels my pains," Kaelin muttered, rubbing his temple where a phantom ache had just sparked. "I feel her fears. It is not a gentle connection. It is raw." "It is new," Lyra corrected, "and born from trauma on both sides. Her spirit is wide open, screaming in the dark. Yours reached for it. Now they are linked. It will likely mellow with time, as she heals and the bond settles, but for now it is a direct line to her pain." The revelation weighed on him. It felt like a violation of her privacy, yet also a profound responsibility. He could no longer just protect her from outside threats. He had to guard his own thoughts, his own moods for her sake as well. The true test of this strange link came on a day of brilliant sunshine. Elara was in the high meadow just beyond the keep walls, with Finn and a few other children, under the watchful eyes of guards. They were picking flowers, their laughter carried on the warm breeze. Kaelin was on the battlements, discussing patrol routes with Rorik, allowing himself a moment to watch her, a small, bright spot of color in the green. A flash of movement, a shadow. From the tree line at the edge of the meadow, a wild boar, confused and enraged by a stray dog from the village, burst into the clearing. It was a huge, tusked creature, all muscle and bristle and primal fury. It didn't charge the children directly, but its sudden, crashing appearance was enough. Screams, panic. Kaelin's world instantly split. On the battlements, his body tensed, his warrior's mind calculating the distance, the angle, the threat. But simultaneously, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated terror swamped his senses. Not his own, but hers. It was the gasping, heart-stopping fear of the forest, of being small and prey, multiplied 100-fold. It wasn't just fear of the boar, it was the terror of Gareth's rage, of helplessness, of the world once again turning violently, unpredictably dangerous. The dual assault was paralyzing. For a crucial second he was frozen, his own instincts warring with the foreign panic flooding his mind. Down in the meadow, Ilara was standing frozen, as the other children scattered. She wasn't looking at the boar, she was locked in a memory, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, her eyes seeing not the sunlight but the dark interior of a hut. Move! Kaelin's own will screamed at him through the bond. Protect her. The command, fueled by the very fear he was receiving, broke the stalemate. He didn't run for the stairs. He simply turned, planted his hands on the stone merlon, and vaulted over the battlement, dropping the 20 feet to the ground below with an impact that shook the earth. He didn't roar. He didn't shift. He simply stood, his full, formidable presence expanding to fill the space. He looked at the beast, and his eyes, no longer just gold-flecked, but glowing with a faint inner light, held not aggression, but absolute dominant authority. The message was primal, flowing from him in a wave of palpable power. This one is mine. You will leave. The boar, sensing a predator of an entirely different order, scraped its hooves, snuffled, and with a final disgruntled squeal, turned and crashed back into the woods. The silence that followed was stark. The guards, who had been rushing down from the gate, skidded to a halt. The other children peeked out from behind rocks and trees. Kaelin turned. Ilara was still standing there, shaking like a leaf in a gale, her tears streaming silently down her face. The shared terror in the bond was receding, leaving behind a hollow, shaky aftermath. He walked to her slowly and knelt. He didn't touch her, he just waited.
Her eyes, wide and shocked, focused on him. You jumped," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes. The boar, it was so loud, so angry." A sob hitched in her chest. "I was back there. I was so scared." "I know," he said, his own voice rough with the echo of her fear. "I felt it." Her gaze sharpened on his face, understanding dawning. The headaches, the scraped knee. This. "You feel what I feel?" "Sometimes. It seems our vow, it tied us together, more than I intended." Fresh tears welled, but of a different kind, overwhelming, confusing. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." The absurdity of her apology in the wake of what had just happened struck him. A choked sound, half laugh, half sob, escaped him. "Laura, you have nothing to apologize for. The bond is my burden, not yours. It is a privilege to share it, even the hard parts. It told me you needed me, and I came." She took a shuddering breath, the residual panic finally ebbing away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She took a small step forward and leaned her forehead against his shoulder. It was the first time she had initiated contact. He carefully put his arms around her, a shelter against the aftershocks. He could feel her heart hammering against his chest, slowly calming to match the steady, strong rhythm of his own.
The guards ushered the other children back inside. Finn gave Alara a worried, sympathetic look before he went. Alone in the sun-dappled meadow, surrounded by scattered wildflowers, guardian and child stayed like that for a long time. The unseen bond, tested in fire and fear, had not broken. It had, in its raw, painful way, held. And in the quiet that followed the storm, it began to feel less like a violation and more like a promise written in their very souls. He had vowed to stand between her and any danger. Now, it seemed, he would also feel the echo of her fears, and she, perhaps, would someday feel the unshakable strength of his resolve. They were linked, for better or worse. And as Kaelin lifted her into his arms to carry her back to the safety of the keep, he knew, with a certainty that went beyond kingship or magic, that he wouldn't have it any other way. The boar incident left a mark, but not the one Kaelin feared. Alara wasn't more afraid, she was more aware. The invisible thread between them, now acknowledged, became a fact of life, like the mountain outside her window. It was unsettling, but also, in a strange way, comforting. She was never truly alone in her fear. He was there, a steady presence in the back of her mind. As spring deepened, her curiosity, no longer solely focused on books, turned toward the keep itself and its people. She saw them shift sometimes, guards on duty at the outer walls melting from human form into massive, sleek wolves in the blink of an eye. She watched from her window as patrols returned, a mix of men and beasts moving with a unified, powerful grace. She heard the howls that echoed through the peaks at night, not screams of savagery, but complex, haunting songs that spoke of territory, of unity, of mourning, of joy. She never asked, she just watched with those two observant blue eyes. Until one afternoon, during a lesson in the library, Master Alden pointed to an illustration in a bestiary, a magnificent, snarling wolf with intelligent eyes. "The Lycan," he said, his voice matter-of-fact, "a being of dual nature, not a monster cursed, as some tales say, but a people blessed, or burdened, with two souls sharing one skin." Alara traced the picture with a careful finger. "Which soul is real?" Alden smiled. "Both, child. The human mind, the wolf's heart, the wolf's instincts, the human's compassion. They are not separate, they are woven together. To deny one is to cripple the whole." She thought of Kaelin's control, his gentle hands, and the glowing, terrifying authority in his eyes when he faced the boar. Two souls. She looked up at Alden. "Does it hurt to change?" "For some, when young, it can be unsettling, like growing a new limb. For a mature Lycan, it is as natural as breathing. It is simply becoming whole in a different shape." That evening, after a quiet supper, she found Kaelin in his study, staring into the fire. She stood in the doorway, clutching the edge of the doorframe. "Papa?" The title felt new on her tongue, a gift she gave sparingly but with growing certainty. He turned, the solemnity leaving his face. "Alara, is everything well?" She took a deep breath. The question she'd carried for weeks finally found its courage. "Can I see?" He knew immediately what she meant. A stillness came over him. "See what?" "The wolf, your other soul." He sat silent for a long moment. He had dreaded this. The wolf was not a tame thing, not a spectacle. It was powerful, primal, and to a child who had known violence, it could be the incarnation of every monster from her darkest dreams. "It is not a tame thing, Alara," he said gently. "It is me, but without the walls I build as a man. It is all feeling, all instinct. It can be frightening." "I'm not asking to see a tame thing," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm asking to see you, all of you. Master Alden says to deny one soul is to cripple the whole. I don't want you to be crippled for me." Her words, so wise and so heartbreakingly earnest, struck him to the core. She wasn't asking out of morbid curiosity. She was offering acceptance. She was trying to heal him of the need to hide. He stood. Not here. The meadow, at dusk. They walked side by side to the same meadow where the boar had charged. The sky was painted in strokes of violet and orange, the air cool and sweet with the scent of evening blooms. He led her to the center and turned to face her. You must stay exactly there. Do not run no matter what. Do you understand? Running triggers the chase instinct. Promise me. I promise, she whispered, her eyes huge in the fading light. He nodded, then stepped back several paces. He closed his eyes. There was no dramatic roar or painful cracking of bones as in the frightening stories. There was a shimmer in the air around him, a blurring of his femur as if seen through heat haze. It was swift, silent, and profoundly graceful. Where Kaelin had stood, there now stood a wolf. He was enormous, taller than a warhorse at the shoulder, his fur a deep, shadowy gray-black that seemed to drink the twilight. He was power made flesh, heavy muscle coiled under thick pelt, paws the size of dinner plates, a broad head with intelligent gold-flecked eyes that were indisputably his. He was majestic, and he was, undeniably, terrifying. Alara's breath caught. Every instinct screamed at the presence of a supreme predator. Her heart galloped, but she held her ground, her feet rooted to the spot as she had promised. She didn't see a monster. She saw the same careful control, the same watchful intelligence. The eyes held her, and in them she saw no mindless fury, only a question, a waiting. Slowly she raised her good hand, palm out as she had seen him do with skittish horses in the stable.
The great wolf lowered his massive head. He took one step, then another, moving with a liquid silence that belied his size. He stopped just before her, his head still lowered to her level. His warm breath, smelling of the forest and wild mint, fogged in the cool air. He was waiting. Trembling, not from fear now, but from awe, Ilara reached out. Her small hand, pale in the dusk, touched the thick fur between his eyes. It was coarse and soft at the same time, incredibly warm. She sank her fingers in, feeling the solid skull beneath. "You're so warm," she breathed. He leaned into her touch, just a fraction, a gesture of vulnerability from this creature of legend. She moved her hand, stroking along the line of his jaw, over a velvety ear. He closed his eyes, a low, almost inaudible rumble vibrating in his chest. Not a growl, but a sound of profound contentment. In that moment, the last vestige of the monster myth shattered. This wasn't the beast from her mother's warning. This was her guardian, her papa, in a different shape, but with the same heart. The wolf's heart, as Alden said, and she could feel it, steady and strong through the bond they shared, a wave of protective, gentle love, so fierce it brought tears to her eyes. "You're beautiful," she whispered. The wolf opened his eyes and looked at her, and in that gaze she saw everything. She saw the king, the warrior, the man who whittled by her fire. She saw his loneliness, his burden, and his unwavering vow. And she saw, reflected back at her, a little girl who was not prey, but pack. He shifted back, the change as fluid and silent as before. He knelt before her, human once more, his expression raw with an emotion he couldn't name. "You were not afraid," he said, his voice husky. "You told me not to run," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. "You're still you. You're just more." He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair, overcome. She had seen the most feared part of him and had not flinched. She had called it beautiful. In her acceptance, she had given him a gift greater than any crown could bestow, the freedom to be wholly himself in her presence. As they walked back to the keep in the deep blue twilight, hand in hand, something settled between them, solid and permanent. The bond thrummed with a new harmony.
She had faced the wolf and found a guardian. He had revealed the beast and found not fear, but trust. The shape of a family, they were learning, had nothing to do with form and everything to do with the heart beating within it. The seasons turned. Summer blazed across the high meadows, painting them with a riot of wildflowers that Ilara would weave into clumsy crowns. She presented one to Calin one evening, a lopsided circle of daisies and bluebells. He wore it on his brow throughout a full council meeting, much to the bewilderment and hidden amusement of his advisors. The bond between them settled into a gentle hum, a shared sense of contentment, the occasional spike of her frustration over a difficult lesson, and the steady drum of his protectiveness. But the whispers from the south never fully died. They mutated. Gareth's gruesome end became a campfire tale, the fate of the child stealer, used to frighten misbehaving children in distant villages. The details grew more grotesque with each telling: demons with ice for breath, spectral wolves with eyes of fire. Calin monitored the reports with a frown, but as no tangible threat emerged, he allowed himself to believe it was merely the grinding of the rumor mill, turning tragedy into folklore. For Ilara, life became a series of wonderful firsts. Her first proper birthday celebration, with a cake iced with honey and berries. Her first ride on a gentle old pony, Calin walking steadfastly beside her, his hand on the bridle. Her first completed book, read cover to cover on her own, which she placed proudly on her once empty shelf. And then came the invitation. A scroll, sealed with wax the color of dried blood, arrived by a travel-stained messenger. It was for Calin, from the Silver Veil Coven, a reclusive order of scholars and seers who dwelt in the mist-shrouded valleys to the east. They were hosting a conclave, a gathering of the Northern Realm's leaders, scholars, and mages to discuss border tensions, trade, and ancient prophecies that were supposedly stirring. "You will go?" she asked that evening, watching him study the scroll. The idea of him leaving the keep sent a faint, cold tremor through their bond. "I must," he said, not looking up. "It is politics, boring, tedious, but necessary. Silvervale is neutral ground. A show of presence is expected." "How long?" "A month, perhaps a little more with travel." A month, an eternity. Her face must have shown her dismay, because he finally looked at her, his expression softening. "Rorik and Lyra will be here. The keep is impregnable. You will continue your lessons with Master Alden. You will be safe." Safe, the word had grown so solid around her, but it felt tethered to him, to his steadying hand on her shoulder. The idea of the stone walls without the king inside them made them feel suddenly hollow. "I could come," she said, a desperate, foolish hope in her voice. He shook his head, gentle but firm. "The conclave is no place for a child. It is days of arguing in stuffy rooms and nights of tense feasting. You would be miserable. And—" he hesitated, choosing his words. "There are those there who do not look kindly on humans, let alone a human child in the care of a Lycan king. Your safety is my first concern. Here, I know you are safe." The logic was unassailable, but it felt like a rejection. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. In the weeks before his departure, a strange thing happened. Ilara began to see a ghost. At first, it was just a flicker at the edge of her vision in the library, a tall, slender figure in gray robes standing between the shelves. She'd turn and no one would be there. Master Alden would be dozing at his desk. Then she saw it in the courtyard at twilight, a hooded shape watching from an empty archway, gone when she blinked. She told Lyra, who checked her for fever and prescribed a tonic for overtaxed nerves. She didn't tell Calin. He was preoccupied with preparations, and she didn't want to seem foolish, or worse, unstable. The ghost never threatened, never came close. It just watched, and it felt, somehow, deeply sad. The day of Calin's departure dawned clear and cold, an early autumn bite in the air. He knelt in the main courtyard, his travel armor gleaming dully, to say his farewell. He looked every inch of the warrior king, but his eyes were soft as he looked at her. "Be brave, little one." He pulled her close, nestling into his side. "Listen to Lyra and Rorik. Learn your letters. I will bring you a story from Silvervale, a new one for your shelf." She clung to him, her face pressed against the cold metal of his gorget, breathing in his scent of leather and winter pine. "Come back soon," she whispered, her voice muffled.
"Always," he vowed. He pressed a small, smooth river stone into her hand, one they'd found together on a walk, to remember the strength of Stonehaven. Then he was mounting his great black horse, the guard falling in around him. With a final nod, he rode out under the portcullis, the thunder of hooves fading into the distance until there was only the sigh of the wind. The silence he left behind was a physical thing. The keep felt too big, too quiet. That night, Elara ate supper in her room, the food tasteless. She lay in bed, clutching the river stone, the bond, a faint, lonely thread stretching out across the miles, thin and strained. She must have fallen asleep because she woke to moonlight painting a silver rectangle on her floor, and there, in the corner of her room, stood the ghost. It was clearer now. A woman, her face pale and serene within the hood of her gray robes. She wasn't transparent. She seemed solid but made of mist and moonlight. Her eyes were fixed on Elara, and in them was that same bottomless sorrow. Elara sat up, her heart hammering, but not with the old blind terror. This was a different fear, the fear of the unknown, the supernatural. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The ghost did not speak. She simply raised a slender spectral hand and pointed, not at Elara, but at the door. Then her form shimmered, faded, and was gone. Elara sat frozen for a full minute. Then, driven by a compulsion she didn't understand, she slipped out of bed. She padded to her door, opened it, and peered into the dim corridor. It was empty. The ghost's pointing finger hung in her mind, not at her door, down the hall, toward Kalen's chambers. Holding her breath, she crept down the cold stone passage. The door to his study was ajar. She pushed it open. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating his massive desk, the empty chair, the maps on the walls. Nothing was out of place. But on the desk, where no scroll had been before, lay a single piece of parchment. It looked old, its edges crumbling. Drawn on it was not a map or words, but a symbol, a complex, interlocking knot of lines that seemed to writhe in the moonlight, centered around a stylized, weeping eye. Beneath it, in faint, spidery script, were 2 words: "He knows." A cold water deeper than any winter wind seeped into Elara's bones. She snatched the parchment, her hands shaking. He knows. Who? Knows what? Was this a warning from the ghost, or a threat laughed by something else? She fled back to her room, the parchment clutched to her chest. The ghost was gone. The bond with Kalen was a thin, anxious thread in her mind. And in her hand she held a mystery that smelled of old magic and dire warning. The safe, predictable world of lessons and flower crowns was over. Kalen was gone. A spectral sentinel had delivered a message, and Elara was alone in the silent keep with a secret she couldn't begin to understand. The graduation from protected child to something else had begun in the most terrifying way possible. The parchment felt like ice against Elara's skin. She hid it under her mattress, the strange symbol and its cryptic message burning in her mind. He knows. The words chased themselves in circles. Did they refer to Kalen? To Gareth? To some unseen enemy? The ghost's sorrowful face haunted her waking hours. She told no one. Lyra would call it a fever dream. Rorik would launch a security sweep, causing panic and find nothing. Master Alden, a spark of hope flickered. He knew about old things, symbols, stories.
2 days after Kaelin left, she brought the parchment to the library, hiding it in the folds of her tunic. Master Alden was dusting a high shelf, humming tunelessly. She waited until he descended the ladder. "Master Alden," she began, her voice small in the vast quiet, "I found something, in a book, a picture. It confused me." He peered at her over his spectacles. "A picture? Which book, child?" "I don't remember. It fell out." It was a weak lie, but she presented the crumpled parchment, smoothing it on the oak table. The moment Alden's eyes landed on the symbol, his humming stopped. All color drained from his wispy face. He didn't reach for it. He took a step back, as if from a venomous snake. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice stripped from his usual gentle warmth. "I told you, it was in a book." "There is no such book in this library," Alden said, his gaze sharp and terrified. He leaned closer, but still did not touch the parchment. "This is the Weeping Eye, the sigil of the Umbral Cabal." The name meant nothing to Alara, but the fear in his voice was contagious. "What is that?" "A cult, ancient and thought extinct for 3 centuries. Sorcerers who dabbled in forbidden magics, in stealing power from the spaces between life and death. They were destroyers of souls, Alara, not just killers, consumers." He pointed a trembling finger at the symbol. "The Weeping Eye signifies stolen sight, knowledge taken from the dying, from the tortured. He knows." He read the words aloud, his voice shaking. "This is not a message, child. It is a receipt, a boast." "A boast? For what?" Alara finally looked at her, his old eyes filled with a dread that had nothing to do with her. "For knowing a secret, a terrible secret. The Cabal's power came from extracting final, painful truths from their victims. They would leave this mark as their calling card to terrify those left behind." He gripped the edge of the table. "Where did you really find this?" The ghost, the pointing finger. She couldn't hold it in anymore. The story spilled out in a terrified whisper. The apparition in gray, the pointing, the parchment on Kaelin's desk. Alden listened, his face growing graver with each word. When she finished, he sank into a chair, looking suddenly every one of his centuries. "A spirit in gray robes. That aligns with descriptions of the Umbral Cabal's acolytes. But why show itself to you? Why leave this here, now?" The answer, when it came to Alara, was horrifyingly simple. "Because he's not here. They waited for him to leave." "For who to leave?" Alden asked, but he knew. "For Kaelin. They're afraid of him, so they sent a ghost to give a message to me." Alara's mind, sharpened by fear, made another leap. Gareth, the rumors about his death, tracks not human, not wolf. What if it wasn't a rogue Lycan? What if it was something else, something that wanted the secret he knew before it killed him? Alden stared at her, seeing not a child, but a terrifyingly logical mind piecing together a nightmare. What secret could a drunken brute like Gareth possibly have that would interest an ancient cabal of soul thieves? The answer came from the deepest, darkest well of Alara's memory. A night, just before her mother fell ill, Gareth had visited, shouting, demanding something. Her mother, frail even then, had been crying. "I don't have it, Garrett. She told me nothing. She took her secrets to the grave." He had roared back, "Liar! The witch told you. I know she did. It's my birthright." Ilara had hidden under the table, forgotten. She thought he meant a physical object, a trinket. Now, with the parchment before her, the word witch took on a new, sinister meaning.
"My grandmother," Alara breathed. "Mama called her a wise woman. The villagers, they sometimes called her a witch. Gareth called her a witch that night. He said she had a secret, a birthright." Alden was on his feet now, pacing. "A bloodline secret, an inheritance of knowledge. That is exactly the kind of thing the Umbral Cabal would hunt. They believed all power was theirs to take, especially power tied to blood. He stopped, looking at her with dawning horror. Ilara, if your grandmother had such a secret, and your mother knew it, or even part of it, then Gareth might have tortured Mama for it before she died, Ilara finished, the words tasting like ash. The memory of her mother's rapid decline, the fevers, the bruises she'd assumed were from the illness. What if they weren't? A new, more profound layer of grief and rage opened inside her. And when he didn't get it, or didn't get all of it, he turned to me. He thought maybe Mama had told me. But you were just a child. You knew nothing. But they, she pointed at the parchment, don't know that. They think Gareth extracted the secret before he died, or they think I might know it now. The ghost's sorrow made terrible sense. It wasn't menacing her, it was warning her, or warning someone through her. We must get word to the king, Alden said, his voice firm with decision. Immediately, he must be told of the Cabal's interest. He's at the conclave, Ilara said, a desperate plan forming in her mind. With other leaders, scholars. Maybe someone there knows about this Cabal. Maybe that's why the ghost appeared now, not because he's gone, but because he's there, where he can be told. Alden hesitated. Sending a message through unknown roads is risky. The Cabal may have agents watching. Then I have to go, Ilara said, the absurdity of the statement outweighed by the crushing certainty of it. Absolutely not. It is far too dangerous. A child traveling with a target on her back? I'm not safe here either, she argued, her voice rising. If they can put a ghost in my room and a parchment on the king's desk, what walls can stop them? They're not after the keep, Master Alden. They're after a secret, and they think it's tied to me or to Kaelin. The only place I am truly safe is with him, and he needs to know what's hunting us. She saw the conflict warring in the old scholar's eyes, duty, fear, and the grim acknowledgement that she was tragically right. Stonehaven's walls were meaningless against an enemy that trafficked in ghosts and stolen souls. Please, Master Alden, she whispered, all her courage crumbling into the plea of a frightened child. Help me get to my papa. Alden looked from her tear-streaked face to the sinister symbol on the parchment. He thought of his king walking into a gathering of powers, unaware that an ancient evil had fixed its weeping eye upon his house, upon his daughter. He let out a long, shuddering sigh. There is a way, he murmured, almost to himself, an old, secret way out of the keep, built for royalty in times of siege. Only the king and the keeper of knowledge know of it. He met her gaze. If I show you, you must swear to follow my instructions exactly. You will travel with one person only, Bryn, the silent huntsman. He is loyal to the bone, and can move through these mountains like a shadow. You will go to Silvervale. You will find the king, and you will tell him the Cabal has returned, and their gaze is upon his hearth. Ilara nodded, her heart a wild drum of fear and desperate hope. She was leaving the safety of the keep not as a runaway, but as a messenger, carrying a warning that could save her father and unravel a mystery buried in her own blood. The ghost had delivered its message. Now the child had to deliver the answer. The secret passage was not a grand staircase, but a crack. Master Alden moved a specific, unremarkable stone in the library's oldest wing to reveal a dark, narrow fissure that smelled of damp earth and cold stone. It led down, deep into the mountain's roots, to a subterranean river and a small moss-covered boat.
Bryn, the huntsman, was waiting there. He was a man of few words, his face weathered like the cliffs, his eyes missing nothing. He nodded once to Alden, then his gaze settled on Alara. There was no surprise, only a grim acceptance. He helped her into the boat without a sound. "The river flows south, joining the Silver Run," Alden whispered, his voice echoing in the cavern. "It will take you 3 days to the foothills. From there, Bryn knows the overland paths to the Coven's Valley. Be swift, be silent, trust no one." He pressed a small cloth-wrapped bundle into her hands, journey bread, dried meat, and the cursed parchment. "Give this only to the king." The boat slipped into the black current, and the world of stone and safety vanished behind them. The journey was a blur of darkness, the gurgle of water, and the rhythmic dip of Bryn's paddle. They slept in shifts on rocky ledges, eating cold rations. Ilara's fear was a constant companion, but it was a sharp, clear fear that kept her alert, unlike the fog of dread in the keep. The bond with Kaelin was a tight, anxious thread pulling her south. On the 4th night, the bond flared with a sudden, sharp spike of alarm, not her own, but his. Kaelin was agitated, worried. Something was happening at the conclave. The thread thrummed with tension. Ilara clutched the riverstone in her pocket. "We have to hurry," she whispered to Bryn. He simply nodded, and their pace increased. They reached the outskirts of Silvervale on the 7th day. The valley was shrouded in a permanent, gentle mist that glowed with an eerie silver light, giving the place its name. The Coven's spires rose from the central lake like fingers of bleached bone. The air hummed with subtle magic, raising the hairs on Alara's arms. Bryn melted into the tree line at the edge of the valley. His part was done. He pointed toward a lesser-used path that led to a service gate. "Guards there are fewer. Tell them you are the daughter of the North Wind, seeking your sire. They will know." He pressed a calloused hand on her shoulder, a brief, solid comfort. "Courage, little one." Then he was gone, leaving her alone at the edge of the mystical mist. She walked, her heart in her throat, toward the gate. 2 guards in silver-gray livery barred her way. They looked at the small, travel-stained, determined girl with suspicion. "I am the daughter of the North Wind," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I seek my sire." The guards exchanged a glance. One disappeared inside. Moments later, he returned with an older woman, her hair the color of the mist, her eyes a piercing, knowing blue. She looked Alara up and down, and her gaze lingered on the small shape of the riverstone clutched in Alara's hand. "Come," the woman said simply, and turned. Alara followed, through gardens of glowing fungi and past pools where fish with luminous scales darted. The mist coiled around her, and she felt unseen eyes upon her. They entered the main hall of the conclave. It was a vast, circular chamber under a dome of crystal. Representatives from a dozen races and realms sat or stood in tiered seating, but all conversation died as Alara was led in. She felt small, grimy, and utterly out of place. And then she saw him. Kaelin stood near the center of the chamber, facing a tall, arrogant-looking elven ambassador. He was in the middle of a tense debate, his back to her, but as she entered, he stiffened. The bond between them exploded with shock, recognition, and a surge of protective fury that he quickly banked. He turned. His eyes found her across the crowded room. The kingly mask shattered, revealing raw, undisguised fear and confusion. "Ilara?" The single word, filled with so much emotion, broke the silence. Every eye in the room turned to her. The elven ambassador sneered. "What is this? A peasant child interrupts the conclave. Is this your notion of diplomacy, Lycan?" Kaelin ignored him. He was moving toward her, his long strides eating up the distance. He reached her and knelt, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes scanning her for injury. "What are you doing here? How did you come? Are you hurt?" The questions tumbled out, his voice low and urgent. "I had to come," she said, her own tears finally spilling over. She fumbled for the cloth bundle in her tunic. "There's a ghost and a parchment. Master Alden said it's the Umbral Cabal. They're back. They were after Gareth. They're after us." She thrust the bundle into his hands. "He knows. The parchment says he knows." Kaelin took the bundle, his face grim. He didn't open it there. The name Umbral Cabal had sent a visible ripple through the chamber, particularly among the older scholars and the coven's own leaders. Whispers hissed through the air like snakes. The mist-haired woman who had brought Alara in stepped forward, her voice carrying authority. "The conclave is adjourned for the day. This matter touches on security for us all." Protests erupted, but Kaelin was already standing, drawing Alara close to his side. His expression had shifted from worried father to fearsome king. "My child has crossed dangerous lands to bring a warning. I will hear it. The rest of you can argue about trade routes later." He led her from the hall, the weight of 100 stairs on their backs. In a private chamber provided by the coven, with the mist-haired woman, who introduced herself as High Diviner Selene, present, Kaelin unwrapped the parchment. He stared at the weeping eye. His face went pale, then hardened into something terrifying. "This was in my study?" Alara told him everything: the ghost, the pointing, finding the parchment, her conversation with Alden, her theory about Gareth and her grandmother. She told him of the silent journey with Bryn. As she spoke, his anger was replaced by a deep, chilling comprehension. "The attacks on our southern border this past year," he murmured to Selene. "Not random skirmishes, probes. They were looking for a weakness, looking for her." He looked at Alara, his gaze haunted. "Your grandmother was not just a wise woman. My trackers once reported rumors of a powerful human seer in the border villages, one who could see the threads of fate. She disappeared years ago. I never connected her to Gareth, to you." "The Cabal feasts on such power," Selene said, her voice grave. "They consume magical lineages, hoarding the knowledge in their collective, well, let us call it a library of souls. If they believe this child carries even an echo of that sight, they will not stop," Kaelin finished, his voice like granite. He looked at Alara, and the ferocity in his eyes was not directed at her, but at the world that threatened her. "You should not have come. The road was too dangerous." "The keep was dangerous too," she said, meeting his gaze with a strength that surprised even her. "The danger was inside the walls. At least on the road I could see it coming. At least here I am with you." He pulled her into a crushing embrace, his face buried in her hair. The bond between them flooded with his relief, his terror, his immense pride, and a love so vast it felt like standing in the sun. "My brave, foolish, brilliant girl," he whispered, his voice thick. He released her and turned to Selene, the king fully returned. "The conclave is over for me. My territory is under threat from an ancient evil. I must return to Stonehaven and fortify not just our walls, but our spirits against this." Selene nodded. "The coven will provide what aid we can, wards against spiritual intrusion, knowledge of the Cabal's old haunts, and," she added, looking at Alara with newfound respect, "we will send a guardian with you, one who can see the threads she cannot." Later that night, in a tower room overlooking the silver mist, Alara was finally clean, fed, and wrapped in a warm blanket. Kaelin sat beside her bed, just as he had in the healing ward a lifetime ago. "I am sorry," he said, his voice low. "I built walls to keep dangers out. I never imagined a danger that could slip through the cracks of memory and blood." "You couldn't have known," she said, her eyelids heavy. "But now we do know, together." He took her hand. The bond was quiet now, a steady, reassuring hum of mutual presence and resolve. The mystery of the ghost was solved. The enemy had a name. The fight was ahead of them. "When we get back," Ilara murmured, already half asleep, "I want to learn, not just letters, about wards, about the old magic. I need to understand what's in my blood so I can help protect it." Kalen looked at his daughter, the lost child he'd found in the woods, who had just crossed mountains to deliver a king's ransom of a warning, who now spoke not of hiding, but of learning to defend. The child was becoming a protector in her own right. "We will learn together," he promised, his heart full of a fierce, painful hope. The road home would be dangerous. The shadow of the Cabal loomed ahead, but they were no longer guardian and ward in a silent keep. They were a king and his heir, standing back to back, facing the gathering dark. Stonehaven's gates did not just open, they swallowed the returning party. The silence that felt hollow in Kalen's absence now felt different, charged, watchful, a bowstring drawn taut. News of the umbral cabal had run ahead of them like a cold front, and the pack's mood was a mixture of fierce loyalty and simmering unease.
For Ilara, the return was a homecoming layered with new meaning. Her room was the same, but she saw it with new eyes. It wasn't just a refuge anymore. It was a command post for a young person learning the maps of a hidden war. The simple river stone she kept on her windowsill was now a talisman of two journeys, one from terror to safety, and one from safety to purpose. The coven's emissary, the vision seer named Aaron, was a quiet, unsettling presence. He spent his days in the highest tower, reading the smoke from burning herbs, his eyes seeing things in the shifting patterns that made others shiver. He asked Ilara gentle, probing questions about her dreams, her grandmother, the ghost. His questions weren't frightening, they were analytical, like a healer diagnosing a fever. "The bond between you and your father," Aaron said to her one afternoon in the sunlit garden, his voice soft, "it is a lighthouse in the spiritual mist. The Cabal navigates by such lights. They are drawn to power, especially power anchored by love. It is both your greatest shield and your most visible beacon." "So we hide it?" Ilara asked, frowning. "You cannot and should not," Aaron said, a faint smile touching his lips. "To dim it would be to deny its nature. Instead, you must learn to wield it, to feel not just each other's fear, but each other's strength, to turn the beacon into a blade." Kalen's strategy sessions were no longer held only in his study. They spilled into the training yards, the forge, the kitchens. Every soul in Stonehaven was a thread in the keep's defense. Lyra studied antidotes for psychic poisons. Rorik drilled guards in formations designed to fight things that might not be wholly solid. Master Alden and Aaron pored over crumbling texts, cross-referencing Ilara's fragmented memories with ancient lore. One evening, a week after their return, Kalen found Ilara not in her room or the library, but in the old chapel, a dusty, rarely used space dedicated to forgotten ancestors. She was staring at a stained glass window depicting a wolf and a lamb lying down together, the moonlight painting them in shades of blue and silver. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice echoing softly in the vaulted space. She shook her head without turning. "I was thinking about the ghost. She was so sad. I think she was trying to warn us, but she was also trapped, a piece of someone the Cabal stole." She finally looked at him, her young face solemn. "We have to stop them, Papa, not just for us, for all the ghosts they've made." He came to stand beside her, following her gaze to the window. "We will, but we must be smarter than they are. They hunt in secrets and fear. We will stand in the open, in strength and in unity. That is our advantage." "Aaron says our bond is a beacon." "It is," Kalen agreed. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let them see it. Let them see that the light they are drawn to is not a vulnerable flame, but a forge fire, and it will burn them if they come too close." He led her from the chapel, back through the silent, sleeping keep. As they passed the door to the healing ward, Lyra emerged, looking tired but satisfied, holding a small glowing vial. "The first ward antidote," she said, holding it up. "It won't stop a direct assault, but it should shield a mind from their creeping, whispering magic. We'll start with you two, then the council, then the entire guard." It was a small thing, a vial of liquid light, but it felt like the first concrete step out of a defensive crouch and into a fight. The next morning, Alara's lesson with Master Alden was not about history or letters. He laid a large blank piece of parchment before her and a pot of ink. "The Cabal's power is knowledge, so is ours. Your memory, child, is now a vital text. We will write everything. Every word you remember your mother or grandmother saying about secrets or birthright, every strange dream, every feeling that seemed out of place. We will make a map of your past, and from it we may chart their interest." As she began to write, the words, hesitant at first, then flowing more freely, she felt not just like a victim being examined, but like a scholar uncovering clues. She was not just the protected, she was a participant. That night, as she prepared for bed, the bond hummed with a new steady frequency. It was no longer just an emotional cable, it felt like a shared watchtower, a silent communication of "all is well" and "I am here." She sent a pulse of deliberate gratitude and determination down the line. A moment later, a wave of fierce, unwavering pride echoed back, followed by the deep, calm certainty of the mountain itself. She smiled, blowing out her candle. Outside her window, the mountains stood against the starry sky, eternal and strong. Inside, the hearth fire of Stonehaven burned bright, fueled by loyalty, knowledge, and a love that had redefined monsters and heroes. The horizon held shadows, yes, the weeping eye was still out there, but Alara was no longer looking at the horizon with dread. She was studying it, learning its contours, preparing to meet whatever came from it, not as a lost child, but as a daughter of Stonehaven, her hand firmly in her father's, their combined light a defiant challenge to the dark. The story of the monster and the child was over. The story of the king and his heir facing the dawn of a new war had just begun.